There's a lot of debate, I think, about this book. I don't think I know. And I hope. And then the last book I read, which I actually technically finished because it is over and my reading is over. Hi everyone, it's Audrey and welcome back to Chapter and Converse. Today's video is going to be part 2 of all of the books that I read in the merry, merry month of May. And if you missed part 1, I know I'm being a spaz. I will link that for you down below. I read 4 books. I read one of them twice. No lie. I listened to it and I read it. I loved it. I'm obsessed. And if you want to know which book that is, tune in to part 1 of the video. But today I have 4 books to talk about. They are all supremely different. Part 1 is definitely all mystery thriller, and this one definitely is a lot of opinions, a lot of thoughts, a lot of feelings, and some mystery and murder. So let's do this. So first up, just to get it out of the way, I did an entire video on The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins, which is the Hunger Games prequel, and I will also link that one for you if you guys want to watch all of my thoughts on that. And if you don't, and you just want the Cliff Notes version of it, basically, meh. I am not a huge Hunger Games fanatic. I enjoyed the trilogy. I read all 3 books when the movies came out. I totally enjoyed the movies. Love me some Jennifer Lawrence. But I thought they were great books. I was totally sucked in. I loved all of it. Sad about a lot of the ending of it. But anyway, I was super curious about the prequel, and I was super surprised when I found it on day 1 on Hoopla in the audiobook. So I snagged it. It was like 15 hours, and I listened to it because I wanted to know. So long story short, it's the prequel for the Hunger Games, and it's an origin story for President Snow, who, not a spoiler, we know winds up being an evil, horrible human being at the time we finally get to the 74th Hunger Games. So origin stories in and of themselves, I think, are tricky. I didn't feel like he picked a lane. I didn't feel like it was like Good Guy Gone Bad or like Born This Way. I just felt like it was slow. He seemed passive in a lot of ways to me. And while there were like little nuggets and like winks to the later books that I enjoyed, one of the things that I was thinking a lot about, which I didn't actually talk about in my first video, is I love any kind of book series, any kind of like movie, TV series, whatever it is, where the author knows where things are going or the writer knows where things are going, and they literally plant tiny little nuggets. It could be someone in passing, it could be a line, it could be a reference to something, and whether it's books later, weeks later, years later, depending on what we're watching, listening to, reading, it gets picked up and you find out it was there all along because the author knew what they were doing. Now, there are references in Songbirds and Snakes to things that happen in the Hunger Games, and maybe, again, I don't know, I didn't go back and read them, maybe there were things in the later books, and maybe Suzanne Collins had this prequel planned all along, I don't know, but I didn't think it was like particularly amazing that she made references to Mockingjay, Jabberjays, made the odds be ever in your favor and stuff like that, because it already exists and we know it exists. So I have a lot of questions about Tigress, who we find out is Snow's cousin, and in Mockingjay we just know her as the crazy lady who looks like a tiger, who owns the store in the capital and hates Snow, but we don't know why. So I would have loved more of that relationship, but anyway, it is what it is. I would like to assume that there's going to be more of these prequels and maybe the story will eventually develop, but at the end of the day, I didn't feel changed in any way having read it. I don't feel any different about Hunger Games. I don't feel like I got more out of it. I don't feel like I understood him more. Team Sejanus is basically all I'm going to say about that. And if you want to hear a whole bunch of thoughts, feelings, spoilers, tune into the other video. The second book I read is The Guest List by Lucy Foley, and I am super excited about this one. So I mentioned in one of my haul videos, or maybe even last month when I read The Hunting Party, I am late to the Lucy Foley game, but she is 100% an auto-buy author for me. And this is another isolated mystery. This one is set in Ireland at a weekend wedding. And much like The Hunting Party, it is multiple viewpoints, a cast of somewhat unlikable characters, but not all of them, but a lot of them. And we know out of the gate that somebody is dead, and then we go back in time and we lead up to finding the body, finding who done it, all of that in the entire book. And one thing I will say is it is very similar in plotting and structure and style to The Hunting Party, and I wish it hadn't been so much. So I thought it was completely clever in Hunting Party, and here a little bit of it felt been there, done that, because I had, and I also read them pretty close to each other, but it was still very well written. I really liked the characters. I wasn't sure who was dead. Once again, a lot of these people were great candidates for being the killer and for being the victim. So I did enjoy all of the questions and the wondering and the what ifs. And there was one thing I did pick up on, not sad that I had figured part of it out. And I did like the way she's very good at leaving a little bit of a breadcrumb where you think one thing is happening, but it's something else, or ending a chapter on a like great, and then you flip to another viewpoint and you've got to like get back to that first person to see what was happening. So all in, I enjoyed it. I will say I definitely liked Hunting Party more. Like that to me was a 5-star book. I would say this is 4 stars, which doesn't make it a bad book in any way. And the one thing I wish had been different, and I'm not going to spoil it, I'm just going to say there was something that felt like far too much of a coincidence for me. And I'm not a big fan of coincidence in murder mystery books. If it's like, you know, like a meet cute, that kind of contemporary type of thing, I'm fine with it. But in murder mysteries, if there's like too much coincidence, I'm a little... So I almost wish they had done something slightly different at the end. And I will... This is in my Goodreads review of this, so if you want the spoilery part, I will link my Goodreads stuff is all down below. But I almost wish that it had just sort of been an essence of something that still would have explained one character's motivations without having to be like a hardcore coincidence. So how's that for super duper vague for you guys? But hands down, very much enjoy her writing. Can't wait to read more from her. I'm excited to see what else she does. She's written a bunch of historical fiction before this, which I haven't picked up. And in one of my other videos, I stupidly said this was her second book, but I think it's like her 4th or 5th. But it's her second thriller, psychological murder mystery type thing. But total Agatha Christie vibes with the isolated island, with the, like I said, unlikable cast of characters, the not quite sure whodunit, and I highly recommend it. I think it was really well done. And again, if you haven't picked up The Hunting Party, I would 100% read that and start there. But this was great fun. The next book I wanted to talk about is My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. And I listened to the audiobook of this, and I have so many thoughts and feelings, and I finished this a few weeks ago at this stage, and I am still sitting with it. I'm still thinking about it. I haven't bought it yet, but I'm going to, because I definitely feel like this is a book that I'm going to want to read again. But I will, out of the gate, just say this 100% is not going to be for everyone. There is a lot of dark, hard to read / listen to parts of this book, but it is simultaneously powerful and thought-provoking, and there are moments, none of this is my reality, but there are moments of relatability and understanding, and I just was fascinated and interested, and at times had to turn it off and just walk away from it for a while and sit with it and sort of let things percolate and sink in. So this is a book about a girl at the time named Vanessa Y. And when she is 15 years old, she goes to a boarding school in, I want to say they're in Maine, and she winds up having a relationship with her 42-year-old English teacher. And we get part of the book in the year 2000, and then it flips back and forth to 2017. And in 2017, her teacher, Jacob Strain, who she is no longer involved with, has been brought up on charges of sexually abusing his students. So some of his students have come forward. And it is in the press, it is in the paper. There had been rumors about him and Vanessa at the time, and one of the girls has reached out to her and asked her to come forward and tell her story to support the other girls that have come forward. And it forces Vanessa to kind of relive that time in her life and to confront what's happening in the present day. I don't know if my experience with this book would have been different had I read it versus listened to it, but one of the things that I found extremely powerful about the audiobook of this is there's one actress who does the entire reading, but she literally changes her voice so much between the 2000 version of Vanessa and the 2017 version of Vanessa, and you can almost hear, you actually can hear in her voice what a different woman she is in the present day, and almost how profoundly broken she sounds in the present day. And it was so impactful to listen to it, even though it was really hard at certain times, but you get the different intonations in her voice. And I feel like it really created such a picture in my mind of who this girl was. This is definitely one of those books that has sparked a lot of conversation, a lot of controversy. And I think what's really interesting, and without, I don't want to spoil things, there's so much to this book, but it's really Vanessa's exploration of, was she in this romantic, consensual, wonderful first love relationship that she thought it was at times, or was it this completely inappropriate relationship with this 42-year-old man who groomed her and abused her and took advantage of her, and how all of that obviously has impacted her life now. And what I found most interesting is that there is no one answer with Vanessa, and she goes back and forth, back when she was 15 and even in the present day, looking back on it in hindsight, and she can recognize things that were wrong about it, but she can also justify certain things about it. There is a real disturbing authenticity to 15-year-old Vanessa and what she went through with this man. And again, I think what's really hard to listen to is that, you know, she will say, I'm not a victim. I refuse to be a victim. I wanted this to happen, and I can't be a victim if I consented to having all of this happen, right? And then she'll flip to being like, this was completely wrong, but then she'll flip back the other way. The writing itself is haunting and beautiful and disturbing, but I feel like I want to underline 100 passages in it. I was listening to this particular passage. I was walking down the street. I was out for my walk, and I actually stopped and rewound it and listened to it again, and like stopped and rewound it and listened to it again. And I was crying while I was walking. And thank goodness I was wearing sunglasses, because this completely just cut me to the core. So Vanessa is talking to somebody else. It doesn't matter who, and I'm not going to tell you, but she says, I can't lose the thing I've held on to for so long, you know? I just really need it to be a love story, you know? I really, really need it to be that. Because if it isn't a love story, then what is it? I look to her, glassy eyes, her whole face wide open with empathy. It's my life, I say. This has been my whole life. I just get the chills even reading it now. If you are willing to take a risk on this book, and if you think that this is a book that you can read, I highly recommend it. Give it a go at your library, try the audiobook, try the written book. I just think it is so incredibly well done. All the obvious triggers. Like I said, there were parts that were hard. I had to stop. I had to step away for a couple of days and then come back to it. I definitely needed some levity in between. And it's a lot. It's a lot of book, but I understand why everybody's talking about it. I understand why people say it's an important read. I still feel like I am processing a lot of it, but I'm really glad that I listened to it. I'm glad I read it. This was one of my most anticipated books this year, and it didn't disappoint me, even though it still left me feeling incredibly uncomfortable, but I think it's supposed to leave me feeling incredibly uncomfortable. And not every book is going to be sunshine and rainbows, and I'm well aware of that. And you guys know I do enjoy dark books and dark topics, and I think it's important to push my boundaries every once in a while and to put myself in uncomfortable situations, and this book was definitely that. But I highly recommend it if you think this is a book for you. I thought it was just incredibly well done, and I am, again, really glad that I listened to it. The next book, I would say, surprised me how much I liked it, but then in hindsight shouldn't have surprised me how much I liked it, because I liked his previous book that I read. And this book is The Word is Murder by Anthony Horowitz. And the book that I am referencing is Magpie Murders, which he wrote a few years back, which is a book within a book, and I think it's incredibly clever, incredibly well done. It has modern day mystery to it, but then the book within the book is a very throwback Agatha Christie Poirot type of book, and I thought it was clever how they were woven together. I thought it was clever how it was done, and I 100% liked it. So I immediately snatched up this book when it came out. This is the UK cover, in case you're wondering why it might look different if you have it. And I immediately popped it on my shelf, and I immediately did not read it. And a few days ago, I was talking to my dad, and this is one of those books where I was like, I'll read it and I'll lend it to you. And he asked me about it since libraries are closed and he's sort of running out of things to read. And I was like, okay, I'll make you a deal. I will lend it to you when I see you next week. And then I immediately picked it up and started to read it. So I actually did... I probably read 50% of it, and then I wound up doing about 50% on audiobook, which I did during my walks, which is a big thing I've been doing lately, and they are both wonderful. So physical book, audiobook, can't go wrong either way. But here's what the story is actually about. So this is about a fictional detective, Hawthorne, and he is brought into this wild case, and it is a woman is strangled 6 hours after organizing her own funeral. Did she know she was going to die? Did she recognize her killer? So Detective Hawthorne used to be on the police squad, I'm going to say it wrong, in London. He wound up getting kicked out, unclear why, but they still reach out to him on sort of some of these weirder, harder to solve types of cases. And Hawthorne happened to be a consultant on some of the things that Anthony Horowitz did. So he has done Foyle's War, he's done a bunch of TV shows, he has written a whole mess of books, and this is a self-insert with a great wink and a nod, and is one of those books that I feel like could have gone either way, and it 100% went the right way. So Hawthorne reaches out to Horowitz, fictionally, and says, I'm on this murder case, you need a new story, why don't you follow me and write about me? Because Hawthorne needs some money, and he thinks Horowitz needs some new ideas. So you 100% get real Anthony Horowitz in this, and he references his books and his family and like one of his editors and things that have really happened, but then there's all this fictional stuff mixed in with real life, and he basically becomes the Watson to Hawthornes Holmes. And I thought it was just so well done. I loved it. The mystery in and of itself is totally bizarre. This woman literally goes to the funeral parlor to arrange for her funeral, and 6 hours later she is dead. So the can of worms, as you can possibly imagine, is open on this one. And I thought it was, like I said, really well done. It has very Agatha Christie-ish vibes to it. There's a whole lot of people with motives, there's red herrings, there's twisty dark paths that we go down, there's murder, and I just thought it was great. I thought it was absolutely great, and I ripped through this book in a matter of days. I just needed to know what was going to happen. I had some theories, most of which were wrong. One thing I had a hint at, and I was kind of right about one thing, but I really enjoyed how twisty and turny it was. And this is, I don't know if I said this is the first in a series, and I actually have the second book as well, so I'm excited to jump into that. But this was just such a pleasant, fun read, and I don't know what took me so long. It's set modern day-ish. You know, he wrote it a few years ago, but it's in current times, and I just loved the way he wove in reality and fiction. And like I said, I think he took a huge risk with this book, and I completely think it paid off. And he pokes fun at himself in some ways, I loved it. So it's told from Anthony Horowitz's perspective, and it's just great. It's just absolutely great. So highly, hugely recommend this. If you have not read any of his books, definitely start here. Start with Magpie Murders if you want. I have House of Silk, which is a book that my dad gave me a while ago. So I'm excited to keep reading his books because, like I said, pleasantly surprised and a banging way to end my month. I am feeling really good about the books I read. I definitely am trying to focus on a little bit of what I own, a little bit of something new, a little bit from my library, and I feel like I'm getting a good smattering all around. And I feel like I'm in a pretty decent reading headspace, but I'm not putting any pressure on myself to do anything. I'm just going with the flow more than usual. So I hope you guys are doing really well. If you have thoughts, feelings, comments on any of these books, definitely leave them down below so we can continue the conversation. And I hope you guys are doing all right. I know these are, it seems, tougher times to navigate by the day and heavier times by the day. So I hope everyone is taking care. I hope you and everyone in your universe is doing well. And I will see you guys back here with another video really soon. So take care, guys, and thanks for being here. Bye.